Good morning, everybody. My name is Heidi Truitt. I am the training manager for Girl Scouts Heart of Central California. And this is Stories with Shasta. Shasta is my camp name. And so when I live and work up at camp, I use the name Shasta. And today I have a story that's a retelling of a fairy tale. And it is called The Frog Princess. And it's by Rita Schlachter. And I have always really enjoyed fairy tales, and this series called Newfangled Fairy Tales tells fairy tales with a comic twist. So we're going to read through this one and see what that funny twist is. This one is told from the perspective of the Frog Princess. So when you're listening, you can close your eyes and listen to it as if the Frog Princess was telling you this story. I am a frog princess. And like any princess, I've always dreamed of a handsome prince sweeping me off my feet. Well, one sunny afternoon, while I was basking in the warmth of my favorite lily pad, I looked up, and there he was, leading his horse to my pond for a drink. He was tall, with sparkling pond green eyes and mud brown hair. My heart started beating double time. I became so tongue-tied I couldn't catch the pesky fly buzzing around my head. The prince knelt down and dipped his cupped hands into the water. Suddenly, "My ring!" he shrieked. A golden ruby band sank to the bottom of the pond, well out of his reach. This was my big chance. Splash! I leaped onto the bank beside the prince. Perhaps I can help. "You're a frog," said the prince. "A frog princess," I said. "How can a frog help a prince?" "I can swim." "Then you must save my ruby ring, because I can't swim," said the prince. "That ring has been in my family for generations. As the eldest son, I received it as a sign that I will in time be the next king." "I will retrieve your ring on one condition," I said. I know that a reward shouldn't be the reason for doing a good deed, but who knew when a prince would stop by my pond again? I couldn't let this opportunity slip by. "What more could a frog want with a pond, a lily pad, and a few juicy flies?" asked the prince. "A companion," I answered. "You must agree to marry me." "You're a frog!" exclaimed the prince. "I am really a princess," I explained. "An angry witch turned me into a frog when my father refused to let her snip one of her prize roses. You must always be careful what you say to a witch. They have terrible tempers." "That's awful," said the prince, "but you're a frog now, and I could never marry a frog." I looked in the pond. "Shoo, little fish, don't eat that ruby ring." The prince splashed his hand into the water to scare the fish away. I could never stand on the castle balcony and wave to the people with a frog wife standing beside me. I could never sit next to a frog wife in a dining room filled with important dignitaries. No, never. "Oh dear," I said, looking at the swirling mud. "I think your ruby ring is sinking into the mud." Okay, I'll marry you. Just save my ruby ring," cried the prince. I jumped into the pond and returned in a flash with the ring in my mouth. The ungrateful prince snatched the ring, leaped on his horse, and galloped for the castle. I immediately took off after him. Of course, I needed a lot more time to get there. Once inside the castle, I hopped up and down the halls until I heard a familiar voice. It was coming from the dining room. I peeked through the space under the door and saw my prince sitting at the table with his father, the king. I tapped on the door and called, "Handsome prince, let me in." "Who is that?" asked the king. "A frog," groaned the prince. "A frog princess," I corrected him. "Why are you here?" asked the king. "I retrieved the prince's ruby rings from the pond. In return, the prince promised to marry me." "Is this true?" asked the king. The prince only moaned. "In that case," the king said, "you'd better let her in." The prince dejectedly opened the door and then hurried back to his seat. I hopped into the room. "I know I will make the prince a very good wife," I told the king. "A prince cannot marry a frog," said the prince. "A frog princess," I corrected him again. "You cannot go back on your word," said the honorable king. I leaped onto the back of the throne and said, "Kiss me." A prince does not kiss a frog, said the unhappy prince. A frog princess! I was getting tired of repeating myself. Then I stretched upon my back legs so I could reach the prince. I noticed he closed his eyes, wrinkled his nose, and held his breath. Our lips met. Poof! The handsome prince turned into a frog. A very handsome frog prince. It all happened one day while I was sitting on my favorite lily pad, I explained, as the frog prince and I hopped back to the pond. A fairy godmother was flying by, and she dropped her magic wand into the pond. Of course, I jumped in after it. She wanted to reward me. Unfortunately, she could not turn me back into a beautiful princess, but she did grant me one wish. And that's the end of this story, with them hopping back to the pond. There's been so many fairy tales told over the years, and one thing I love to read is retellings where they've taken the stories and added a twist like this one. Or maybe they've looked at the stereotype in the story where maybe it was always a prince rescuing a princess, and they've changed it so that the princess is rescuing herself, or using a skill or talent versus magic to solve her problems. Well, I hope you enjoyed this story. I enjoyed that one a lot, and that you have a wonderful day. If you haven't discovered Girl Scouts, I encourage you to try looking at the Girl Scout websites and seeing what the Girl Scouts are doing to learn more about Girl Scouts and learning how to solve problems on your own and become a great leader. Thank you and have a good day.